is a local artist who currently has an exhibition at the Discovery Centre in Cleethorpes. So, Tracey, it's lovely to see you, and thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, that's fine. Would you like to tell us a bit about your current exhibition, about what it's about, how it's come about, and how it's being received at the moment?
I've had some really nice comments about it. That's always, useful.
Yeah, it's a good start.
It's actually called Eclectic because people come into when I had my studio at Abbey Walk Gallery for 2 years, and whenever people come in, they'd say, "Is this all yours? Do you do all this?" Because there's so much different, so many different styles, and I think that's a bit to do with my art education background. I've done a bit of this and a bit of that, and I get bored doing the same thing. So I've got graphic elements, I've got my abstract elements, a bit more illustration, and I just thought, for once, I think I'm going to embrace that, and so I called the exhibition Eclectic, and that's it. I've got various sections embracing these different styles. Just say, this is what I can do.
It is interesting because when you walk through it, there's something different at every stage of the exhibition. And I found that by the time I got to the end of one wall, I really needed to go back and start again. And I wanted to do it in different directions as well, to sort of see different sort of things in a different order, because it is really interesting and visually quite arresting. And lots of the pictures make you sort of want to stop and really stare into them. So how do you think you achieve that? Because that is quite something to really make people want to stop and stare into the sort of the real depths of it. Do you set out to do that to people?
No, but it's very nice that happens. What I set out to do is just relate my feelings and experiences, but translate those. I mean, there's a whole world of difference between going out somewhere, looking at something, or taking a photograph of something, and then you think of a tube of paint or a tin of paint and this white canvas. How do you get from one place to another? So you have to filter that through me. Yeah. In my case.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So really, I'm just this conduit between the two planes,
right?
The reality plane and the physical canvas plane.
Yeah, we were talking a few minutes ago about that, weren't we? About one of the interesting things that you'd put in the brochure about the exhibition, this idea of transforming the visual reality as you see it in the real world, and then bringing it into a work of art and sort of going through a process to retain something of that original experience, but to represent it in a different way. And you were talking about not using natural colours and sort of moving away from the real in your pictures.
I think that, in my opinion, I mean, it's fantastic if someone can do a precise technical representation of exactly what they see. It's fantastic. I'm not at all putting that down. But to me, I would rather just take a photograph and have that. That's full stop then to me. Whereas I want to do something different. I want to take it further. The way I work is I go out, I look, I feel. I mean, if you think about the salt on your lips on a rainy seaside walk, it's lots of different things and sounds, and then I take a photograph. I take loads and loads and loads of photographs, but I don't want to just copy one.
No.
So I love messing around on the computer, so straight away into Photoshop, mess about with it, crop it, take bits, maybe mix it up with another photograph, lots of different things. And then I end up with this manipulated photograph, which could be totally different colours, or the abstraction varies. And then my painting, I start from this manipulated photograph. I always know where I'm going to start. I never know where I'm going to finish.
Is that exciting?
Yes, it is. because there's always this wobble stage where you think, what on earth have I done? What a mess. Yeah. But I work in layers as well.
Yeah.
So I just build up different colours. I very rarely mix on my palette. Right. I do mix on my canvas, or rather I mix optically. You know, I might do my whole canvas in pink or pink and blue or something, and by the time I finish you may just see little hints of this coming through. Or you might see big areas. It all depends on what works as I'm working my way through the actual painting.
So it is a real journey.
Yeah.
You know, sort of from start to finish.
But I hope that because I go through these 3 stages, that I retain an essence of the original experience. That's my whole point, really. It's very much an external experience, but it's also the way I internalise it.
I think for me, looking at them, I certainly get a very strong sense of that. I mean, there were certain pictures in the exhibition. I mean, it's a really lovely exhibition, and I would encourage our listeners to go along and have a look at it. It's running until the 29th of May. The nature reserve at the lake picture with all those stunning reds and blues, absolutely gorgeous, you know, with real depth, you know, and you feel like you're being really pulled into it and really sort of looking at the colour in a way that is quite arresting. I really loved that. And the red sunset and the blue sea, the rich blue evening, you know, all of these reds and blues, I love those. You know, they work really well. So are you particularly drawn to that sort of end of the colour spectrum, do you think?
I do use a lot of red and blue. I don't know why. It just happens. Yeah, maybe I just think they go well together.
Yeah, I mean,
but I don't represent the reality of the colour.
No.
I do what feels right at the time for me in the painting.
Fascinating stuff. Tracey, I'd like to talk to you a bit about Margate and not your relationship to Margate and how you see the sort of relationship between Grimsby and Margate, because I see an awful lot of posts on your Facebook page about being inspired by or having worked there. So tell me about Margate.
There is a real big relationship between Cleethorpes and Margate. They both were built up in the Victorian era with the railways. They both were really, really busy until the cheap package holidays in the 70s, and then they both went down. There is just such a relationship between the two. So, I don't know, maybe I'm drawn to slightly faded seaside resorts.
That's a good description, isn't it? But there's something very charming about that as well.
I think it is, and I think nowadays people appreciate them more. I think there is a big thing. But Margate is also, I mean, for years before it even was built and through all its different possible incarnations, the Big Turner Contemporary Art Gallery in Margate, which is well worth a visit. They've just had a fantastic Turner exhibition on, which I really wanted to go to and couldn't get to. And they're just about to have a Tracey Emin on because she's from Margate. And that's going to be huge, I think. And it's very interesting to see what a big art gallery can do to a seaside resort, because I think it was quite a surprise that it was built there.
Yeah.
Because Margate's not got the best of reputation, but they you know, I mean, there's the old town, and they've got lots of little shops. They've actually done quite a few illustrations of the shops.
Yeah, they're lovely, those. Yeah,
and
really nice.
Yeah, they went down really well. So I don't know. I was just really drawn to the place. I was drawn to it before I even got there, before I even went there, just from doing research. I don't know, really. It's just one of those weird things that happen that you get attracted to.
You just get drawn in, and you look at it and think, you know, because I suppose it wouldn't automatically come to mind that there would be a relationship between Cleethorpes and Margate until you do start digging. And like you say,
there's a lot, I think.
A lot going on. I sometimes think that some of these places like Cleethorpes kind of fell asleep at the end of the 50s almost. They sort of retain,
polite way of putting it.
They sort of retain that sort of, I suppose it's like shabby chic type feel about them. But when you live in a place like this, and I suppose I mean, I've never been to Margate, I will be honest, but you've obviously visited and feel a great deal of affection for the place. I think they do inspire affection, don't they? People who live in places like Cleethorpes and places like Margate are very protective.
Oh, the people down there are very, very pro where they live. I mean, particularly the small business owners and the people that have come in, the people that appreciate the art, you know, and it was, you know, it was really lovely for me to have an exhibition there. I had one for 2 weeks last November, and it was brilliant. I just had such a great time.
Yeah,
and it was really nice to meet all these, you know, put real faces to a lot of names that I knew.
Yeah,
and they were a great bunch.
It is interesting. Do you think we can look to a time when we might get that here?
Oh, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, a massive public art gallery, contemporary art gallery on the seafront would be really good.
Wouldn't it just?
Yeah. Are you listening, Cleethorpes Council?
Yeah, are you listening? We need these spaces.
People are surprised. You know, people think art, and then they think, it's nothing much. But, it's surprising. I mean, when Abbey Walk Gallery did Out of the Dark, I think that got in something like an extra 20,000 people to freshen your place.
Huge numbers, wasn't it?
And the feedback was amazing.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? It was a real triumph, I think, that exhibition. I mean, I think what it did is it drew a lot of people into the art world who perhaps previously might have been very nervous about approaching it. Because in a working class place like this, I think a lot of people tend to hold the view, oh, well, art's not for us. And I don't think that's true.
I think it's for anybody. Yeah. I mean, you can say, I don't like this or I don't like that. But there'll be something you like.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really nice when small children come and look. Yeah. I think it's brilliant when they look and then they enjoy. Because, a month or two ago, there was a school group came round. I think they were about 7 or 9. They weren't very old anyway. And they were just the excitement of going round. Apart from any life drawings, which caused a bit of consternation.
I can imagine. Yeah, but I think if you inspire little ones when they're young and tell children when they're sort of very small that art is for everybody and you can have an opinion and you can go and look at things and you can appreciate it and then you can go away and be inspired by it, that brings about a kind of a lifelong relationship with the arts. And I think that's desperately important and something I'd certainly like to see more of.
I think people are scared of walking into art galleries. They think they're elitist. They think if they can't talk the talk. But it's just, I think that's outdated now. I mean, just going to Abbey Walk Gallery, how friendly is that?
Exactly. And if you
cup of tea and coffee, never mind anything else.
Absolutely. And if you want to know something,
just ask.
And people will talk to you about the art and they'll explain.
Any decent gallery will be interested in what they've got on their walls. And they know that 90% of people that are going to walk into that gallery haven't got massive pockets.
Yeah.
And they're going to go in for the interest. And that's fine. That's great. And people shouldn't be scared of going in for those reasons.
I think that's what Jill and Elaine have brought to Grimsby, really. I think that gallery has done a huge amount of good work in terms of making art more accessible and bringing people in and encouraging people to go and have a look.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so important. And, I can't emphasise enough that the exhibitions at the Abbey Walk Gallery are free to view. Tracey's exhibition is free to view. Go and have a look and be inspired because these things are stunning and beautiful and they do add something, even if it just adds something to your day, makes your day a brighter, more colourful, happy experience. It's well worth going and having a look. I wanted to ask you about your Cornwall experience because I was conceived in Cornwall, and I have a very sort of strong sort of genealogical link to that part of the world.
One of my dogs is Cornish.
Is she? Lovely. How? I mean, Cornwall's reflected in a lot of your work, isn't it? You've got paintings of places in Cornwall, and we were talking about the light in Cornwall earlier. Do you want to sort of say what Cornwall meant to you while you lived there and how it sort of affected your work?
I think I will go back slightly to my experience just before I went to Cornwall. After art school, I worked in Debenhams as a sales assistant. Oh, what a soulless job. It was weatherless world, and I just couldn't bear it, so I wanted to get out. So decided buying a business was, a good idea. Looked around everywhere, particularly like Cornwall. And we bought a shop and post office. So I was a sub postmistress for a while. Right. had all these ideas of what we were going to do, and you do run out of time really.
Yeah, it's a tough job. Yeah,
but it was so beautiful down there, and we lived just below the Helford River, and if a sea can sparkle, it does all around there. And it's really lush and green. It's, beautiful microclimate, and you're just so close to the sea wherever you go in Cornwall. And artists have flocked there for years and years and years. Places like Newlyn and St Ives, and it's got a very strong art and craft ethos. People really appreciate art down there. Visitors and people who live there.
But it's everywhere. Wherever you go in Cornwall, it doesn't matter which town you're in or which part of Cornwall you're in. There is art of visual art and photography and sculpture and craft. It's there. It seems to be part of the culture, a part of everyday life, and it's not a wealthy place in many ways, is it?
No, I think there's a lot of tourists. The incomers are possibly the ones that support the local people. But it's one of those things. I lived in a village where there were a lot of second homes.
Yeah.
And, a lot of lets. But, the pub, the restaurant, the shop wouldn't survive without those incomers.
Yeah.
It's one of those real awkward dualisms.
Yeah, I think
and
it's
yet
a conflict.
in winter, if I walked to the pub down the hill, there were only 1, 2, maybe houses that people were in.
Yeah.
But it was, it was very rare that, people weren't there. It was a very we were lucky where we were. Somewhere like Helford can be really dead in the winter, which is such a shame.
Yeah, because it's a beautiful place, whatever time of year.
Yeah, it
is really, and the sea is different moment by moment, and I was very sort of drawn to that north coast. I think it's absolutely spectacular.
Well,
really.
my favourite ever painting was called, because we used to go to a beach just near Newquay called Crantup Beach, and it's a beautiful wide National Trust beach. And my favourite ever painting was Winter Walk. And that was a rainy day. And it's because in the winter, it was empty. We had it to ourselves and it was just really lovely. I mean, in August, it would be bodies. But it was just really beautiful. And actually, I sold that in Margate.
Right.
To a woman that lives in Margate and Cornwall.
Right. Oh,
gosh. And she saw in that painting exactly what I did. So it was a bit of a moment when I sold that. But I sold it to the right person. So. And
that's nice when the paintings get a good home and they're going to be appreciated.
I like to know when my baby's going.
Yeah. that's a really nice thought. What got you started painting? What was it that made you pick up your brushes and do it? Were you good at it at school, or was it something you came to later?
I got a U in O level.
Yeah.
But I do think that was because I actually didn't do any work. I had a teacher that was just absolutely the wrong teacher for me. If you couldn't whiz out something in 2 minutes that looked exactly like the subject, he wasn't interested. And, I was one of those people that probably needed to feel my way around something first. I don't know what happened. It was just really weird, but I can't remember actually ever doing any work. And for my favourite subject, that was kind of weird. Yeah. But my granddad used to paint. He had a studio at the bottom of his garden. He converted a greenhouse, which just kind of got bigger and more solid as time went on. And he had a rabbit running around it and the dog.
Oh.
Used to go around with a shovel, finding the currents.
Oh, lovely.
But he used to... he took early retirement so he could paint full time, and he used to take the paintings around the pubs and clubs and hang them, and I used to go around with him. So right from early days, it's kind of been there. My school experience though was the one that put me off, and so I actually did my degree with the Open University, but I did a coherent art history profile, thinking, well, if I can't paint, I can at least look at them, and. So I got that over quite a few years. But then when we moved to Banbury in Oxfordshire, I actually ended up on my art foundation course by mistake.
All right. Okay.
Which was the best mistake I've ever made, because I thought, once again I was in this can't draw, can't do. As I say, it really put me off, and so I went for an interior design course, and it was full.
Oh.
And the tutor said, "Well, what about the art and design?" Oh, I can't draw. So he said, "Right, go away, do me three drawings of this, and this, and then bring them back." And so I went, and I was kind of, on the way home, I was like, ooh, and then, ooh. It was this real mix of like excitement and scared stiffness. And so I went and did that. He said, "Well, they're not too bad."
Right.
So you're on the course. So I did that, and it was the best 2 years of my life. It was actually a part-time course, but I did more than full-time hours. So I got an awful lot out of it. And it was brilliant. I enjoyed everything from fashion to graphics to advertising, photography. In fact, the thing I did least of was painting.
Right.
And did a couple of days of that.
Right.
But and then I went on and I did graphic design, illustration and advertising for just over a year at High Wycombe. And so I think I'm pleased I did it that way. I'm pleased I didn't do it's in such a controlled way, because I think my work now is a reflection of everything I've done.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bit of a mixing pot, but it's worked for me.
And it sort of makes life more interesting, I suppose, because you bring bits of all of your experience to it then, don't you?
Yeah.
And you haven't just gone down one pathway. You've travelled a few places, had a few experiences. And you're right, you bring it all back to your life as an artist.
Because I really didn't know which way to go. I mean, I always loved photography, and I love messing around with computers. I mean, my very first digital camera, when nobody else had one, cost me £400, and you got about 4 pixels to the inch. It was terrible. Everything came out really pixely and brown. So that's what started me off with messing around on the computer, because I had to mess about with every photograph to get something out of it, whether it was the composition or enhancing colours or anything. And so everything I've done has been kind of by accident, but in a good way. And
that's a nice way of doing things, isn't it? Sort of the accidental artist. Could be your autobiography. When you're working with paint, do you have a preferred method? Do you and what materials do you use as well? What medium do you like to work in?
Well, actually, I always thought I'd use oil. And I think that's just because what I saw, being used all the time. And I have done oil paintings, but I tend to, because I work in so many layers, and I obviously haven't got any patience, so I need something that dries fairly quickly. So I do use, I use a mixture of emulsion. I tend to use Farrow and Ball ones because I just love the colours.
Right.
They're just rich and the high pigments. They are, I mean, it's an expensive way of doing it because I buy the tester pots. But yeah, so I start off with those, and you get a good vibrancy, but they're very flat.
Right.
It's very flat emulsion. And then I tend to use acrylics and turn into that sort of halfway through. And then, I'll do anything. I think on whatever the weather, I just started scribbling over it with pencil.
Right.
Yeah, all of a sudden I'll think, what do I need? What do I want to do? And I'll root around and I'll splash ink on it, or I'll just grab something to hand, or I'll start scribbling over the toothbrush, or I don't know. It's just whatever.
Yeah. So
whatever
you're not
feels.
frightened to experiment?
No, because you can always paint over it. If you do something that's really disastrous, you can think, off we go.
But you may come up with something spectacular.
Yeah.
So it's worth messing around.
I've stopped being scared.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you're scared, the one thing my tutor said at art school that really stuck in my mind was, don't be arthritic. Don't go with your hand and your pencil because you're concentrating too much. You need to free everything up. Yeah. And I think that's the best advice I could give to anybody. Don't worry about how it should be done. Just do it. If it's wrong, it's wrong. It doesn't matter.
That's brilliant.
Or if
advice.
it doesn't work, should I say?
Yeah, try something else.
Yeah.
Until it does work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's wonderful to have that kind of fearlessness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Who is it? Who inspires you then? When you're thinking, right, who do I like? You know, whose work would you go and look at for inspiration?
I try not to.
Interesting.
Yeah, as I say, when you're at art school and everything, you do go round exhibitions and you look at things, and obviously some things you like, some things you appreciate, some things you'd put on your wall, some things you wouldn't. But I actually try not to be inspired by anybody, because if I feel somebody else's work creeping into my work, I don't feel it's my work.
Yeah, I can understand.
So
that.
I actually look less now than I did do before.
Right.
Or I look quickly.
Yeah. And don't let it settle in the mind too much,
because I don't want to be too influenced.
So that's interesting. That leads me back to something we were talking about earlier about, feeling, is it you doing the work, or is there something else operating as well? And you told me a brilliant story earlier on about painting your dogs for your daughter, and I think that would be fascinating to share with listeners. So tell me about what happened when you painted that picture for your daughter.
It was a far more realistic picture than I ever normally do. And it was just basically looking at the back of them, sitting on the blanket box, looking out the window, waiting for her to come home, because she lives in London now. And it's called Waiting for Chloe. But when I was painting it, I felt the dogs. It wasn't so much paint coming off my brush, it was me feeling them. I could feel their bones, and how they looked was really in my mind, because I just look at them all the time. I fuss them all the time. I'm stroking them all the time or brushing them, and I just felt them as I was painting them, and it really was the weirdest experience I've ever had. It was strange. I knew how to do the curve because I felt the curve.
Wow.
It's
fascinating.
It was really strange.
Yeah, becoming at one with your work.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you were saying earlier, didn't we, that when you don't paint, when you're not working, you miss it.
Oh yeah,
have
definitely.
To do it. Yeah.
It is frustrating.
Yeah. And you were saying you can't wait to do another painting.
No,
get going.
I'm itching
to go. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tracey. I really have enjoyed talking to you, and I will be following your work with great interest in the future.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.